Thank you for joining us today. Our webinar, Math and Reading, Preparing Students for Life After High School, presented by Dr. Jessica Fuda-Daddio. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, welcome everybody, and thanks for joining me this morning. Today we are talking about math and reading, preparing students for life after high school, but we're doing it in a bit of a different way. As I started to reflect on this topic, and from my experiences working with many teachers, a little bit about me before I move forward. If you listened to my earlier webinars, you probably know about me already, but specific to this presentation, I actually consult with teachers 7th through 12th grade, special education specifically, in the area of literacy. And a question they often ask me is, how do we get our students ready for life after high school? Most likely they're not going to go to college. This is typically what they'll tell me. And I kind of always look at them and I think, well, okay, well, what do they need to know to be successful? And typically we would collaborate about what's needed and reflect on those things, and then start to create some ideas together about how to get students ready. So today's presentation isn't so much about a checklist of items that your students need to know before they leave. It would be a little unfair for me to do that because it's very dependent on your school district, on your specific students, and things like that. But today, what we're going to do instead is kind of reflect a little bit, which is what my research is on. As a lot of my research is on reflective practice. Reflective practice is actually what will drive how we meet the needs of our students. That is especially true when it comes to our high school students that are about to leave us and go out into the real world. So, obviously, today, this presentation will be about reflection and reflecting on the needs. I'm reflecting on what we know about what these students need to be successful, and then how to apply that into what we do with our students. So, welcome, and I hope you enjoy the next hour with me. So, the first place I'm going to start, and this is an interesting place for me to start, because as I was doing research on this topic, and I was in every single page, what do students need to know? How can I present this in a webinar? What I found was interesting. I watched a lot of different talks when it came to what students say they wish they would have learned in high school. And a lot of it was home economics, amazingly. So that's interesting. Very few things were about literacy or math, but more so just about the realistic way to live. So what I want to do this morning is kind of take us through this idea of a path. This is somewhat of a long video, but I think it's an important way for us to start this conversation. And a reminder of what it means to find a path. And typically, whenever we work with high school students, we're trying to guide them towards some type of path. The important thing to remember is there's not one path for everybody. We know that. But also, whatever path they start on doesn't mean that's the same path they'll be on. And so we have to figure out what we need to do as teachers to help them realize that the path that they're on right now and where they're heading, what that might look like, and what they might need to cope and survive when it comes to the real world. So let me share with you this little clip here. Like I said, it's a little longer than typical, but I think it's important. I also was thinking about, you know, as teachers, you're extremely busy. You're always running and doing things and thinking and wondering what to do next. That I thought bringing this video to you through a webinar will actually give you an opportunity to watch it. So let me go ahead and get us started. Give me 1 second here. All right, and here she is, and this is about how to find your path after high school.
Ever since I can remember, there's been one question I've continually been asked. A question I'm sure all of you here today have heard dozens of times before. What do you want to do after school? But I've recently concluded that this most frequently asked question to generations of kids is now one we need to delete. It needs to be moved to the spam file. And today, I'm going to explain why, and then replace it with an updated idea that you can take away to help find your path. But first, can you put up your hand if you've ever been asked this big question? Okay, now keep it up if when you answered it, you weren't sure you wanted to commit to doing this one thing forever. That's what I thought. And research supports this idea that most of us don't know what we want to do after school. And why should you, with no experience yet in the world after school, have to commit to doing one thing forever? You shouldn't. Is it stressful? Yes. Is it constructive? No. And let me tell you, there are an endless amount of options out there, and you should have the right to grow and learn, explore, and, yes, change your minds. This question isn't helpful or inspiring and does nothing to help you find your path. So instead, the spam file is where it needs to be. And here's why. S. It's stressful. While globally mental disorders are on the rise, the World Health Organization reports that 1 in 5 youth are affected. Another study conducted in the US by a generational expert, David Stillman, found that 75% of Gen Z, that's the 72 million youth of today, said they were more worried about starting a career than finding a soulmate. Now, these statistics not only highlight the anxiety around the unknown future, but support the idea that we need a new approach. And although I just missed the Gen Z cutoff, I get it. It's stressful. There really is a ridiculous amount of choice out there today. I can feel the anxiety as I talk about it now, although that might be because I'm standing on a stage public speaking, one of my greatest fears. Either way, I do understand. For me, the transition from high school was really tough. And now when I say tough, I mean, I wasn't just worrying, I was panicking to the point where I actually felt like I was dying. And this isn't an exaggeration. In my final year of school, I was suffering from generalized anxiety. That repeated question running through my head, what do you want to do, had me paralyzed. By sharing this now, I can see that I put an unreasonable amount of pressure on myself to pick the perfect path and to make the best decision. But how was I to choose? I remember going to visit my school careers counsellor, who got me to sit a test that concluded that I should be a teacher. Now, I didn't know what I wanted to be, but I knew a few things I definitely didn't want to be, and a teacher was one of them. No disrespect to the teachers. I just knew that I wasn't cut out for it. And then I was sent on my way. And at this point, this was how I imagined life should look. But here's what really happened. So I finished high school, anxious and confused, and then decided to take a gap year. I saved up for 6 months, working 7 days a week, and then went travelling around the world at 18 with my best friend. And then I decided to go to university. And for me, university went from not knowing what I wanted to do, to realising I enjoyed my psychology subjects, to realising in my final year that I didn't want to work as a psychologist. So I started researching other options and found myself working in a bunch of other psychology-related jobs. Until 2015, when I wrote a book on the side about pathfinding, because I wanted to spread the message that no matter the age, we're all finding our path. That first transition out of school, that's just the first of many. And then I felt hopeful that my moments of what felt like I was dying in school might not have all been in vain. And then I found myself working as an author. Now, it's taken me 2 years to say that out loud without pulling a face that suggests I'm not sure I'm telling you the truth. And those facial expressions, they still sneak in when I think about it now. So again, I'm not sure where to next for me. If I was told by that career counsellor all those years ago that I'd be an author at some point after school, I wouldn't have believed him. I was average at English, and plus, I struggle to believe it now. But what I do now know is that it's not just me fumbling up and down on my path. It's the same for everyone. This is life. Here are some names you might recognise. So as you can see, life's like a roller coaster. It has its ups and downs, and it's your choice to scream or enjoy the ride. And now to the P in spam, puzzling. When asked this question, what do you want to do? It puzzles us. Because firstly, it assumes that we know the answer. Do we? In that same study conducted by Stillman, he found that 65% of Gen Z will be employed into jobs that don't yet exist. That's most of you. Secondly, the puzzling question suggests that we're picking one path. But what about all the rest? Let's break it down together. I've outlined 4 basic pathways. So travel, work, study, or creating your own path. Now, you don't have to do them all, but you can. I've tried them out now, and while generally I don't enjoy telling people what to do, I'm the eldest of 6, so this may come naturally to me, but for this matter, I do suggest you try any that interest you. At least that way you'll have your own opinion. Let's face it, watching David Attenborough isn't quite the same as taking a gap year. And watching The Social Network, that's not quite what it's like to go to university. Try them for yourself. So you now know that you can do anything. The downside, you can't do everything. These 4 basic choices will actually turn into over 4,000 cities to visit, more than 4,000 degree-granting universities alone in the world, millions of jobs to choose from, and an infinite amount of projects that you can make up yourself. Well, makes sense why it can be stressful. And now I'd be glad that you don't just have to pick one. But no one told me this. No one gave me the memo that there's an infinite amount of choices out there. No one told me that I could be a mattress jumper, or a Disney Imaginer, or a water slide tester, which all sound awesome. Don't get me wrong. This is a big choice you make when you finish school. But it is the first of many more choices to come. This isn't a make or break choice. If you pick something and like it, great. If you hate it, it's time to pick again. You don't have to get it right the first go. And this doesn't mean that you chop and change when things get tough. It simply means when you've given it your all and things aren't working out, that you can make a change. And it's important for me to clarify here that the problem isn't the choice. Choice is a privilege. As I give this talk, many people your age don't have such choices. So it's important to also be grateful if you do. Don't wish away your options. The problem then lies in the lack of support for students to make the transition and the emphasis we place on picking one path. Which leads me to the next point, A. It's ancient. The question's outdated. The days of employment for life are over. You no longer have to stay in a job because you picked it years ago. Now, I don't want to take you back to the dark ages, but I want to give you a brief overview of how the transition has changed. So while the traditionalists and baby boomers commonly worked their way up the ranks, working in one job for 20, 40 years, it was Gen X that broke away from this traditional path, with the famous examples of Bill Gates and Steve Jobs creating their own. So today, you know that you don't just have to follow the path of others. This isn't new information anymore. 20 years ago, it would have been motivating. Now, the anxiety around the choice can overshadow the inspiration. Today, we're slowly seeing a bend towards an increasingly customized path, where you can literally pave out your own. With some universities allowing students to create their own majors, companies allowing employees to create their own job titles, responsibilities, and hours. And as our paths become more customized, the same question still exists. What will you choose? Now, in the past, the motto was the longer the better. Now, it's the happier the better. The shift is away from the companies and back onto the value of the individuals. So it's not about being lazy or entitled, which are words that get thrown around a lot today. It's about staying true to yourself and your path and making the most of this one life we have. Now, lastly, and worst of all, M, the question misses the point. It's not helpful or inspiring, and doesn't teach you how to decide. Instead, being asked this question continually over your lives focuses on the idea of having to make one choice, where there are so many other questions that we could be asked instead, like, what do you enjoy doing? Or what are your strengths? Or what makes you happy? But these questions don't get asked often enough. Instead, we keep getting asked the same old question. So by the time people say, well, if you don't know what you want to do, what are you interested in? You have absolutely no idea, because you spent your whole life focused on picking one career path, one stream, not giving your interests the time of day. So you've had a lifetime to date of answering this question, and now it's gone. What's next? For a generation who's grown up on the internet, this isn't something you can Google. You can try, but in the end, you'll end up with more opinions and more questions. So, how do you find a happy path after school? You tap into your own Wi-Fi. W, watch your interests. Focus on what you enjoy doing. Make a list of 5 things you do in your spare time or things you think about when your mind wanders. Don't underestimate these things. I, investigate your options. Now start by writing down 5 things that you'd like to do when you finish school. So when I was younger, I said I wanted to be a lawyer, a poet, and a marine biologist, because these were some of the options I had in my head. The second part then is to research and write down 5 new things you didn't know existed. And with these 5 new options, you can switch out any on the initial list. And if you do this every month in your final year of school, alongside your interest list, some interesting options will start opening themselves to you. And although some of you will be confident about your answers, and you'll only need to write one thing on this list, if this is you, I'm not saying you have to come up with more options, but I do urge you to keep open. Stay aware of your interests. Even be persistent about them. And know that in the future, if you'd like to make a change or try something on the side, know that you can. F, follow your dreams. And dream big, whatever they are. Never make a decision about your future based on fear, pleasing others, or how hard you think it'll be to reach your dreams. There's a great quote by Earl Nightingale that says, never give up on a dream because of the time it'll take to accomplish it. The time will pass anyway. And lastly, I. If that age-old question sneaks in through the spam, because let's face it, it's going to take a while for the askers to catch up, then you can answer with this. I'm interested in, and I'll see where it leads me. To conclude, I want to leave you with a message that I'd share. If I could go back in time and speak with that overstressed and freaking out 17-year-old me, I'd tell that lanky, wide-eyed teenager to stop searching for a perfect path and start focusing on her path instead. I'd tell her to tap into her unique Wi-Fi. I'd tell her to trust. Trust that if she makes a decision from the information she has, based on her interests, her research, her dreams, then that is, without a doubt, the best decision she can make. Thank you.
Okay, so I felt that this was an important thing to share with all of you, as I said earlier, to bring us back to the true purpose of what we do as educators, but also to remember what these high schoolers are thinking in their minds. There is stress, there is pressure, there is what am I going to do? And then we think some of them don't care, some of them can't. That's where I think we all need to kind of stop for a second and reevaluate our questions we're asking our students. So how do we help our students in math and reading to be successful outside of high school? Maybe our first place to start is to have a conversation with our students. Think about some of the big points made by Amber Brown. commit to one thing forever, that right there is overwhelming, stressful, intimidating. It's not real. However, I will also tell you this. I know people who have said they wanted to be teachers since they were 5 years old. I was not one of those people. I struggled when I left high school, and I wasn't strong in reading, and I wasn't strong in math, but I found my way, and I found a passion within myself, but I never knew what I wanted to do. I had 3 different majors. It took me 6 years to graduate with my bachelor's degree. I mean, you have to work through your way. And some people won't want to go to to college, and that's okay too. So we have to have the conversations with our students, create that relationship, and then find a way to help them get to their first choice, their first interest, that with time might change. And I think that the other powerful thing that Amba explains here is this idea of creating your own path. I think it's important to think about generational differences. She mentions it in her presentation, and I believe there is a webinar that is recorded within this series about generational differences. So you might want to take a look back at that one, because our ideas of what we believe need to happen might be different for the generations that we're working with today. So again, this takes me back to, it was very difficult to create a webinar today on what do students need to know in math and reading, because there's such a difference, and we have to know the students in order to make those decisions. With that, I also thought it interesting that this author, she's an author, struggled in English all through high school. She said that, but she's an author. The other thing I want to mention to you is when I presented at the International Literacy Association, which, by the way, I told you I was a struggling reader, yet my expertise is literacy. When I was presenting at the International Literacy Association, we had several speakers, and they explained that they actually suffered from, I don't want to say suffered from, that would be inappropriate. I want to say that they actually kind of had to figure out how to read while being diagnosed with dyslexia. These people that spoke were actresses, actors, basketball players who are now authors. They found their way. So for us, I guess the reason I share that with all of you is even those students that are struggling in school, even if there is something going on with them behaviorally, academically, the fact of the matter is they can. Maybe they just need a little bit more time and somebody who believes in them. And you might be that person, but they may not be ready to receive that yet. So stay positive and continue to let them know that they can. And they will. And they will in their time. Important to remember. So that's why I thought it important to share that with all of you, because I think it's the perfect place to start out the conversation that we're going to have from here, which is our reflective process and how we're meeting our students' needs. So literacy and math, what we have to talk about, this is definitely in the title of our webinar. Inspire students to be readers, make reading meaningful, make math meaningful. So what do I mean by all of that? Well, inspiring students to be readers. Let me share with you another little thing. I taught a class of bachelor students at a state college, and it was actually remedial reading. You know that class that they come into because they couldn't pass a test that said they were proficient in reading. All right, so they're all sitting there and they're all staring at me, unsure as to where their path was going. They didn't know. They just knew that this was what they were, let's try out college, take a remedial reading class. And my first question to all of them was, what is reading? What do I mean when I use the word reading? And they all raised their hand. And honestly, every one of them pretty much told me that reading is reading a book, a novel, and they hate it. And they can't do it, and it's hard. And I was shocked by this. And I actually, as I consult with teachers today, it's still the thing that they pull books down and say, okay, let's read. And our students are associating them reading with reading a book. They don't enjoy that, therefore they hate reading. And therefore they're not good at it. That's not true. So let's change that mind frame starting now. This would be one thing I will tell you that will help them be successful and confident within themselves as they leave you from high school. Let them really understand what reading is. My response to the students that told me that reading was reading a book I said, really? Huh, okay. So you over there, I saw you on your cell phone. What were you doing? And they thought they were in trouble, of course. They look up, sorry, Dr. Fuda-Daddio, I was reading a text. Oh, wait, hold on, what were you doing? Reading a text. Oh, wait, you were reading? Yeah. Oh, okay. So you mean that reading then can be more than just reading a book? It could be a text message, right? Interesting. What about Facebook? We're reading. How about Twitter? We're reading. How about something you want to get, you want to know? Maybe you like to cook. The ingredients, you're reading. How about when you're driving and you see a stop sign? Guess what? You're reading. Whether it's the red of that stop sign or the actual words or letters, S-T-O-P, you know that it's a stop sign. That's literacy. That's reading. So we changed that thought process in their heads to being, in quotation, failures at reading, to realizing that on a daily basis, they're reading, they're readers, they are readers. And we have to change that mindset, and you need to start doing that now, if you haven't already. That is going to be a huge thing that will bring back confidence in our students. I know that when they get to high school, especially 7th through 12th grade, I'll tell you what, I can't tell you how many times I've observed teachers teaching students and the students being completely defeated. And so we have to revamp, rethink our approach. Newspapers, magazines, websites. When you read with purpose. That's what we do as adults. That's what we need to get our students doing. As for math, I want you to think about math. Again, I come from a literacy standpoint. Mind you, literacy is many things, as you know, right? Listening, speaking, reading, writing. It's also critical thinking. So let's go to math. Guess what? If you're a teacher of math, you're a teacher of literacy, which you are. So as we begin to change the way we think about teaching reading to be more meaningful and more about the real world, we begin to start to think about how we can change the way that we teach math. Mind you, you have a curriculum. You have standards you need to meet. Trust me, I understand. But make sure that when you're teaching these things, or as you have those final conversations with students, that they realize that there are some important things in each of these categories of reading and math and science and social studies that they need to know to be successful. And guess what? Most likely they're very simple. For example, we should probably make sure our students know how to add, subtract, maybe multiply. Long division, there might be a purpose for it, but we have to explain the purpose. That explains the focus, and I will get into that a little bit later. So before I get into all of the purpose and the focus and the reflection piece of this presentation, let me go over these things here I thought were kind of interesting, and this comes directly from Huffington Post. And this is the 5 real tips for success. And this is for you as teachers, as parents, or as students, okay? And the first one is don't sweat the small stuff. We tell our students that all the time, especially those that have anxiety. I'm one. I have anxiety constantly about things, always over-reflecting to a point of being critical. Remember, if you've listened to me before, that's not reflective. Critical, not reflective. But don't sweat the small stuff. Sometimes that works, right? But in actuality, the most successful people in the world actually do sweat the small stuff. It's the small mistakes that we start to reflect upon that help us to continue to propel forward. So in this article that I read, it does say to be sure that you actually do think about this small stuff and you do make adjustments and you start to realize maybe why didn't that small little thing not work and what can I do differently? Again, that all brings us back to reflection. There is a difference between being efficient and effective. This I also thought was quite interesting because as Drucker said, there is nothing so useless as doing efficiently that which should not be done at all. What does that mean? Well, we can do a lot of things efficiently, right? But really have no goal. They're not getting us anywhere. But yet we continue to do these things and wonder why we aren't propelling ourselves forward. So instead, reflect on it. Focus on doing things that make you effective in a manner that is efficient. So what's your goal? What are you trying to do? Now, how can you do that and do it efficiently and effectively? Probably one of the trickiest things I saw was this one, because I think that for us to understand, that we are all working towards something in our lives, but to do that efficiently and effectively, I always tell students, especially doctoral students, I say to them, let's work smarter, not harder. I actually think that's good advice. Work smarter, not harder. Let's be efficient with our time, but effective with our use of that time to continue to reach our goals. Positive thinking, this one seems so simple. And with our students, especially at the high school level, if they've been struggling learners or striving learners, you know, most likely the positive thought is something that we really do need to initiate and keep in our minds. I don't remember the statistic, but I know that it's something about one negative comment needs to be, it takes so many positive comments to let go of a negative comment. So think about that. And if you have internal talk that is negative because of whatever you've lived through in your life as students in reading or math, or just life in general, it's going to take a lot of positive thinking to try to outdo that. We need to change our way of thought. So in this I also thought was interesting. As you heard the presenter say earlier, Amba Brown, you heard her say about writing 5 things down. 5. 5 seems to be a magic number. Because as you look at this, it also says read at least 5 books on the topic that you're truly interested in. So you can really become informative and gain the information needed to be successful. And whatever that is, whatever that big thing is that actually makes a difference in your mind, that makes you smile, that makes you feel like you're something. That right there, 5 things. So keep that in mind, teachers. Well, there's another math thing, by the way. 5 things, right? 5 things that will keep our minds moving, our minds excited. 5 things, magic number. And protect your mind from negative influences. So if you know there's people around you that are negative, I've done this, you have to wash away the negative. You do. You have to give yourself a chance to get away from that. That's hard to do as a high schooler because in your life right there, that's what you think life is at the time. Of course, you have your external life, which who knows if that's positive or negative. And then you come to school and that's your community. So when they get out of there, they have to know how to readjust, to kind of stay in the positive thought. Don't let others bring you down. Don't let yourself bring you down. Solve big problems. So this one, you know what, sometimes there's big problems to be solved. And sometimes, as you see in the picture here, it doesn't always have to be the most popular things that you're trying to figure out. But it's something inside of you that ignites you, that makes you excited. Solve big problems. Tackle those big issues, whether they're personal or professional. Because it is through those big things that you start to solve. When you sit back and reflect, that you can make an impact towards your actual success. So as you heard the speaker, Amba Brown, say, you know, she didn't know what she wanted to do with her life. And she tried this, she did that, never really accepting who she truly was, an author. And that's the same for here. As we go through things, we're going to make mistakes, things are going to happen, there's going to be problems that we need to overcome, some big, some small. But either way, we still have to work towards overcoming those problems. So let's reflect a little bit. Before I go into this, let me go here. Something I've talked about several times in my webinars is this importance of understanding students, of understanding each other and building a relationship. And although there may be times of complete defeat where we feel that we're not giving enough to our students, there are times where we actually do have glimmers of hope, glimmers of something that helps us to, you wouldn't be doing what you're doing today if you didn't feel that you were making a difference in some way, right? But the first thing is to empower our students, especially at the high school level, because they forget. And at that point, some are quite confident, which is great. We continue to build that confidence with them, but keep them humble. And others that we work with are struggling and they know they're struggling. But do they have to be struggling? Let's talk to them. Where do you want to go right now? And then talk, like I said earlier, how can we get you there? Now, in order to truly, honest to goodness, help our students, we need to reflect. We have to think about what life truly is. So I guess I task you with metacognitively thinking about what you need each day to be successful. So as an adult in today's world, which is different, by the way, most likely, from whenever you were in high school, if I'm talking to teachers or even parents. When you wake up in the morning, what is it that you have to do to be successful for that day? What do you have to do? Guess what? By thinking about that and then thinking about the thoughts that are associated with those things you have to do, that's your first step in helping your students to become successful in the real world. So think about it. What do you have to do on a daily basis? And then what do you have to do on a monthly basis to be successful? Pay bills, understand how to communicate with family. Hey, actually, let me take us there now. Communication, effective communication. Guess what? That's a huge skill that we need to be successful, right? And if you metacognitively think about it, most likely you do talk to people throughout your day. But if we are unaware of how to effectively communicate with other people, we learn nothing, and we continue to never be in the moment of our lives. So we want to teach our students how to effectively communicate, not just through text messaging, not just through Facebook, but actually having a conversation. What does that look like? What does it mean to not only have a conversation, but also to hear what the person is saying? So I want you to think about all of those pieces and how that gets you through your day. Bring that to your classroom. Reflect on your mistakes and how they helped you grow or not grow. This kind of goes off of our last slide and the fact that, we will make mistakes. Mistakes happen. It's part of life. Remember, life isn't perfection. It's a process. It's just life, right? So mistakes will happen, but it's how I always find it's the character of the person that comes out of the mistake that was made. So teach our students, how do we, and this is literacy, by the way, how do we overcome mistakes? What do we do? How do we react to something that we're not okay with? It's literacy. That's reading. Reflect on how you take advice from others. I have found personally that I will take advice from others, and some people I will actually listen to more than I would other people. Why is that? What is it that I'm doing? Why do I do that? Think about yourselves. Think about how you take advice from others, and then think about the approach that worked for you and why. And guess what? When you're sitting down and talking to your students, bring that back to your mind as to what worked for you. It might work for your students. It may not. But you have to get to know them to know the approach you're going to use with them, to give them advice as to maybe some things that they could do, given their interests in life. Reflect on how you got a job. What were the necessities in getting that job? So most likely, teachers, whenever you had your first job, it wasn't teaching, it was something else. So what is it that you did in order to get that job? You had to know how to fill out an application, right? You needed to know how, well, first of all, how to find a job, right? Jobs people wanted, were hiring. I just saw on a big sign at McDonald's, hiring. So, first we look there, we find that. So we look at maybe some classified ads in the newspaper. Maybe we look online. We show our students this. This is all literacy. Then we move them into how do we fill an application, right? We also need to teach them the math of all of this and the fact of earnings. What does that mean? What kind of job are we asking for, and what are we going to do from that job? With that being said, most likely they have to be effective communicators. Reflect on your first job. Reflect on what you needed to do to be successful in that job. Bring that to your classroom. It is math and reading. Reflect on how you started to understand the many perspectives of others and how these differing perspectives helped you grow in your own understandings. Again, we're looking at literacy. Perspective. Everybody has a different perspective. It's kind of what makes the world go round. It's how we continue to grow. But how do we communicate with somebody who doesn't share the same beliefs we do? Does that make them wrong? Probably not. But it's a different way of looking at things. And so we start to create an understanding. So reflect on how you do that. How do you do that as a person? And bring that to your students. A really great way of showing, and I read a book last week, I read my last webinar, and it was about the paint. Let me think of the name of it. Oh geez, it is escaping me right now. But the entire book was about how there was a young boy and an older man, and they were kind of going through this life together, this moment in this text. It was the sign painter. At the end of it, what it came down to, the moral of the story was about following your dreams. Do you or don't you? Do you settle to be a wage earner, or do you actually follow your dreams? What do you do? And there's a differing opinion on that, right? Some people will settle and some will continue to strive towards the dreams that they have. And so is there one that's wrong? No. But if you're going to go towards the dreams that you have, you need to have some ways of funding yourself to get there, right? Which again comes back to our math and understanding the the meaning of a dollar. So how can we actually rethink our approach with students? Just like I said, read more stories. No joke. I remember, I think I went through my entire high school career, actually junior high too, where not one story was ever read to me. Maybe How to Kill a Mockingbird. I think maybe that was read to me in high school. I don't remember, but I know that it didn't mean anything to me at the time. I remember sitting in a class in college, and it was my first time I had heard a picture book since elementary school. And it was the most empowering moment in my life because it was so simple. Remember, I was a struggling reader. I hated to read. I still am not a big novel reader, which is why I find it so important for students to understand that there's different ways of thinking about reading. But I remember the professor, she was standing in front of the class and she read this book. And it had such a powerful meaning to it, it was the simplest text though. I think it was for second grade, but it had the most powerful message. Bring your students back there. Make it simple. Make it simple. Stop making things so hard. Think about these read alouds that you can do, simple read alouds, where you can discuss conflict and problem solving, solutions, connections to real life situations. I listened to a speaker, it was a student, it was a high schooler actually, and she was talking about the things that she wished she would have learned in high school. And one of her big pieces was, you know what, I had to read Shakespeare. I didn't understand why I was reading Shakespeare, but I was told I had to read Shakespeare. We all know how that is. Even as teachers, we're told we need to teach something, but we really don't have a purpose behind it. Her biggest point was, let's make it real though. What in Shakespeare can I connect to real life? That's what I need to know. Think about that. No matter what stories you're reading to your students, you can connect them to real life. You can have them connected to real life. You can have them begin to build towards an understanding of what real life might look like, but in a simple way. Not through Shakespeare always, just a simple way. Teach students how to read everything around them. So again, this comes back down to, what is reading really? What is literacy? So body language, street signs, magazines, online articles, video games. It helps students realize that they're readers, and it gives them tips that can help them with the world around them. Teach students how to actually have a conversation. I've already said this, I'm saying it again because I cannot express to you how important this is, and how as I teach college classes, the more that I'm noticing, or even those students that decided not to go to college, how difficult it is for them to have a conversation with you, to be able to talk about what's really happening in their lives, or ask questions, or listen. Allow students to start growing into themselves while still completing the jobs assigned to them with their best effort put forward. So one thing we don't want to do as parents and as teachers is we don't want to mold our children or mold our students. We want to help them into growing into the people that they are, whoever that might be. And we start to help give them resources and tools to be successful in that person they're becoming. That's our goal as teachers. So again, that comes back down to the conversations we have with students, the impact, the importance. Teach students how to understand the price of a dollar, how to save, most importantly, how to earn. So again, we come back to our math. We come back to the point that everything that we do, you know, we have to understand, are we being taken advantage of? Aren't we? How do we know? And we begin to start to help them understand that importance of, because you think about it on a daily basis, do you not think about finances at some point? Probably. Maybe not every day, but quite a bit. So how do we help set our students up for success? That's your math, right? So although we have many different things that we have to get done in math and in reading and everything else, always bring your students back again to the focus of real life. This is what you need to know to be successful as you leave. Have students read the news online and in newspapers, Facebook. So again, this kind of goes back to your generation that you're teaching and explaining to them that just reading a novel, a paperback novel, is not what reading is, but instead every single thing you do on a daily basis is reading. Even grabbing the toothpaste in the morning, noticing when somebody is rolling their eyes at you, all of that is reading. It's all reading. So let's be real. The fact of the matter is this. Yes, there are demands of state testing and demonstrations of success. I am not minimizing that in any way. I do understand the pressures, I really do. And there are moments of mistakes, things that work, things that don't. And remember, as I said earlier, that's what kind of makes us a little different. It helps us to grow is through making mistakes. So that's whenever we build those communications with our students and we say to them, it's okay. But it comes down to now, how do we react to what has happened? How do we make it different? How do we make it better? That again is literacy. But even with the many things I could list here, I can guarantee that by reflecting on what helps you get through in the real world and bringing that into the classroom, you will meet every standard in each curriculum item. And the students will leave with a better idea of how to cope and survive in the world after school. That's an important final bullet point. So if you're listening to this, I read that one, but if you are listening to this and you see the PowerPoint in front of you, read that again. Because I can promise you this, if you are able to reflect on what is working in your life, what you have done, the mistakes you have made, having conversations with your students, explaining to them what they need to know, how to cope and survive in the real world, which all of us are still building, still working on, I think. But those things actually can be so important as the students move forward. I will share a story with you that actually saddens me, but as I shared with you earlier, I told you about that remedial class in reading that I had. And as we built through the rest of the semester, I heard so many times, I can't do this. I've never been able to do this. And I would have conversations with these students and say, but you can, because you need to have the expectation. If you don't have the expectation, they don't either. Empower your students and let them know they can. Allow them to make mistakes and search with them on ways to overcome. But to help them to cope and survive, it goes beyond academics. It really does. And that's why I built in the conversation piece, the importance of that, which actually is literacy. So to cope and survive. That semester had ended, and my students had to write a paper. That was something they had to do. How was that going to help in the real world? Well, it helped organize their thoughts and actually put their thoughts into writing, which is an important skill to have. I had many conversations with these students, and there's many flags that will come up as you talk to students, and you begin to learn about them as people. Some are better at masking what they're feeling than others are. Okay, so I had one really specific student. He was 18 years old, and he was so, I don't know, I guess I felt like he really brought a great persona to the class. He was always willing to participate, but I knew there was more going on with him. And there were moments he would stay after class and talk to me about some of those things, some of the things that were bothering him, some things that were happening in his life, some of the struggles he was going through. And I would listen, but try not to give too much advice because that's not really what he was looking for. He just needed somebody to listen to him. So I had actually created this environment in this class where they felt free to share with me what was going on in their lives, which is, again, very empowering to them. So the sad part of this is I couldn't get 100% into what was going on with this student because he would only share so much, but enough that I knew that there was things going on and some other variables happened. Needless to say, he actually is no longer with us because life had gotten way too overwhelming for him. So when I say to help students cope and survive, it's not just about academics, but it's also about having the time to sit with your students and talk with them. Help them to know where to go to if they need somebody, if they need something. Remind them that they are worth something and that they actually can do. Because I think sometimes that's forgotten. So it's really important to allow that time. And I know that you might be looking or thinking, well, I don't know how to find the time. I'm so busy, blah, blah. But trust me, you can find the time and it will be so much worth it as they continue through school. Doesn't mean we can save everybody, but they know that they're worth something, especially whenever they leave you. So let's be real. This is about purpose. I'm going to get a little bit more out of that into purpose. So purpose, like I told you, when I listen to high school students, when I listen to first year college students, when I listen to students that decided not to go to school, it's purpose. This is what it all comes down to. So what should you teach? How do we help our students when they leave us in reading and math? And the funny part is I told you several things today, which every single one of them were literacy. Every one of them were literacy. So as we talk about math Math is literacy. There are certain things they need to know, certain things that maybe, hey, they got to learn this for a test. Okay, but this is what they need to know to be successful, reflects on your life. So let's be real. Without purpose, there is no reason. Know your purpose. Know what you're teaching and why you're teaching it. Bring purpose to it. Explain to the students that purpose, the purpose of what they are learning and how it helps and how it will help them in the real world. Make connections for the students. Tell them. Tell them. So as you give purpose, you give true reason to learn, right? A true focus, a true purpose behind why they're learning what they're learning and how it will help them as they continue forward. We go back to that. Not only do we start a lesson with that purpose, but we also end the lesson reminding the students of that purpose. So they know that what they're learning in high school, what they're learning in middle school, what they're learning in elementary school actually has meaning and it will benefit them. Think about yourselves. I've said this before. Think about yourselves whenever you're sitting in a class, you're like, I don't even understand why I'm sitting here. Like, what am I doing? Or at a faculty meeting, you're like, ugh. But if you have true purpose of being there, you're gonna listen. If you have true purpose that whatever you're gonna learn about is actually gonna impact you in some way, you're gonna listen, you're gonna hear, you're gonna learn. So that's what you need to bring to the table in the classroom. Remember, learning is not meant to always be a guessing game. I felt that that was important to share because I have observed many lessons where I will sit there and be like, but what did you want them to learn? Because I don't think they know. They're doing what you've asked them to do, but I don't think they know what it is that you were trying to get out of them. There are moments where guessing games are good. More so, let me use the word inquiry. Science, experiments, right? So we can have some inquiry there, some really good investigations. There's power in that. But when it comes to setting a purpose for what it is that they're learning, tell them what that is. Don't make it a guessing game. Not always. Sometimes they just need you to tell them that what you're teaching them will impact them. This is how it will impact them. Are you ready to learn? If you cannot give what you're teaching purpose, then please tell me, why are you teaching it? Standards? I don't think so. You know, I have reviewed the standards and you know, every state's a little different now, but, and then sometimes the same depending on the Common Core. But as you look at the standards, standards are not holding you back from allowing your purpose to be true and meaningful to your students, to the real world of what's going to be coming to them. So I can't say it's the standards, no matter what grade level we're looking at. But it could be curriculum. That's very possible. This is where, when I told you I was consulting with the 7th through 12th grade teachers, and they kept asking me, how do I get them ready for school, life out of school, out of high school? And my big thing was always, you know, let's sit down and think about this. What's the curriculum saying? And maybe make adjustments where needed, but it's a collaborative approach, a discussion of where they need to get, what we're doing to get them there. Maybe curriculum does need to be looked at. I don't know. But I want you to think about these things, because if you are teaching something without purpose, take it out, because everything you teach should have purpose. And if you haven't been teaching with purpose or vocalizing it, because most likely you have a purpose, but you have to tell your students what that purpose is. Be honest and open with them. So with all of that being said, as I told you from the beginning, this webinar wasn't exactly about a checklist of things to do, but instead a reflective practice of what do we do as adults in the real world? How can we bring that into our classrooms? Realizing that literacy is everywhere around us. It's everything we do. You don't have to pick up a book and say, I'm a reader. No, you have to be able to live life and say, I'm a reader. I'm a writer. I can write things down. I can talk about those things. I can text message, although texting's not our favorite thing because of the weird ways they come up with different symbols and whatever. But the fact of the matter is, you are a reader, you are a writer. I always think, go back to the basics. You know, whenever kiddos are just born and they notice that the golden arches of McDonald's, they're readers, they're reading that. They know those golden arches mean that McDonald's is there, which means they're gonna eat soon. So you have to think about that. Think about the simplicity. And then you'll figure out how to help your students as they move forward by empowering them, building their confidence and taking the time to hear them. All right, with that being said, I actually am going to end the webinar with a retrain your brain. Now, what is this? Well, I'm sure if you have been teaching special education, if you've been teaching special education, then you probably know who this person is. And give me 1 second, I'm going to bring it up. And this person is Brian Mendler. Brian Mendler is somebody who travels around the world talking about behaviors and how we approach our students. So as I've been kind of sprinkling throughout, this is the importance of communication, of actually talking with our students, hearing them. And I felt that it would be important for us to kind of end with this thought, because as we try to figure out how to help them through high school, we have to also understand that we need to take the time to communicate with them and hear them. So this is Brian Mendler. This gentleman here, so our first speaker that I shared with you, she was a struggling, anxious person who didn't know where she wanted to go, was not very good in English, not proficient, but became an author. This man here actually was a huge behavior problem in high school. I think he might have been kicked out of high school. I'd have to look deeper into that, but the idea is that he actually was a student with behavior problems. He would actually bring those behaviors into the school, and there was a lot of issues. Now he speaks about it, has made a difference. Share these things with your students, because these are the people that you realize, hey, they weren't perfect, but look at them now. So let me share with you Brian Mendler. Retrain your brain.
So my mother was a teacher for 27 years and an administrator for 10, so she was 37 years all in education. My mother used to have this phrase that she used to use all the time at school, and the phrase was called retrain your brain. And she would say all the time, you got to see things differently, you got to hear things differently. And what she would say is, if you could retrain your brain to, ready? Hear what kids are saying, stop listening to how they're saying it. Hear what they're saying, stop listening to how they're saying it, because often the how ruins the what. And the what is actually quite intelligent, but the how ruins it. If you can, quote, retrain your brain to, ready? Stay personally connected to kids without taking personally what they do and say. Stay personally connected to kids without taking personally what they do and say. Almost always, you will succeed with every kid that comes in front of you. If you can, quote, retrain your brain to, ready? Feel sad for kids instead of getting mad at them. Feel sad for instead of getting mad at. Because what happens in school is, when we get mad at people, we get defensive, we get argumentative, we want to fight back. We feel sad for, we back off. We tiptoe around. We ask questions. We jump back in. But then we back out again. Hear what they're saying without listening to how they're saying it. Feel sad for instead of getting mad at. Stay personally connected to kids without taking personally what they do and say. And my favorite one, if you can, quote, retrain your brain to become a second to last word person with kids. Second to last word. Almost always for the rest of your career, you'll get yourself out of almost any argument or any power struggle that ever comes your way. Because arguments and power struggles are always about the last word.
So I believe that that's probably the perfect place for us to end today. What I will say, though, is as Brian Mendler was talking about have the second to last word, there is a complete presentation on that, about a couple minutes, that you can watch. And really what that's about is stop being the person with the last word. Meaning that maybe hear your students, don't take what they're saying personally, but be personally connected. Don't be the person that has to have the last word with the student. Because most likely that will create a power struggle and actually will hurt your relationship with your students, therefore hindering everything we talked about today. So with that, I want to thank you all very much for joining me. I think I made it to the last second.